The wooden stairs creaked and groaned as Denise's body hit each step. Her scalp burned where Tiffany's manicured nails had grabbed fistfuls of her hair. The sound of her children screaming from upstairs would haunt her forever. 8-year-old Shayla's voice cracked as she yelled, "Mama! Mama!" while 6-year-old Caleb sobbed so hard he could barely breathe. Roland stood at the bottom of the stairs, his arms crossed, watching his wife of 10 years being dragged down by his girlfriend like she was nothing more than trash. The same man who once promised to love and protect her now looked at her with cold eyes. "Get out," he said simply, as if she hadn't spent years scrubbing these same stairs, cooking meals in that kitchen, and raising their children in the bedrooms upstairs. Denise's shoulder throbbed where it had hit the banister. Her favorite Sunday dress, the royal blue one Grandma Ruby had bought her for church, was torn at the seam. Blood trickled from a cut on her lip where she'd bitten down to keep from crying out. Tiffany finally let go of her hair and stepped back, breathing hard. "About time," she panted, fixing her blonde weave. "This house needs a woman who knows how to keep it clean." The irony wasn't lost on Denise. She had kept this house spotless for years, even working 2 jobs to help pay the mortgage when Roland's construction business slowed down. She had planted the roses in the front yard, painted the kitchen cabinets by hand, and spent countless nights up with sick babies in every room. "My children," Denise whispered, trying to stand. Her legs shook beneath her. "They'll be fine with their daddy," Tiffany smirked, examining her nails for damage. "Better than fine, actually. They won't have to watch you moping around anymore." Roland's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He wouldn't even look at his children, who were now pressed against the upstairs railing, tears streaming down their faces. "Daddy, please," Shayla begged. "Don't let Mama leave us." Denise's heart shattered completely. She had known Roland was cheating. The late nights, the phone calls he took in the garage, the way he flinched when she touched him. But she never thought he would choose his girlfriend over his own children. She never thought he would let another woman put hands on her in front of their babies. "I'll be back for them," Denise managed to say, her voice stronger than she felt. Tiffany laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the air. "With what money?" "Roland told me about your little job at the diner. You can barely afford your own place, let alone take care of 2 kids. It was true. Denise worked as a waitress at Mel's Diner downtown, making just enough to help with household expenses. Roland had always insisted she didn't need to worry about money because he was the provider. Now she realized he had been setting a trap all along. "The court will decide," Denise said quietly. "The court will see a stable home with 2 parents versus a single mother with no money and no plan," Roland finally spoke. His voice sounded different, cold and calculated. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Denise looked up at her children one more time. Shayla was trying to comfort Caleb, holding him tight while her own tears fell. Both children had inherited Denise's rich brown skin and bright eyes, but now those eyes were filled with confusion and fear. "I love you both," she called up to them. "More than all the stars in the sky. Don't you ever forget that." "We love you too, Mama," Shayla whispered back. The front door felt heavier than usual as Denise pushed it open. The afternoon sun was too bright after the dim house, and she had to squint as she walked down the steps she had swept every morning for 10 years. She had nowhere to go. Her mama had passed 3 years ago, and her daddy wasn't in the picture. Most of their friends had been Roland's friends first, and she could already imagine the story he would tell them about why his wife had suddenly disappeared. But as she stood on the sidewalk looking back at the house that had been her whole world, something shifted inside her chest. The pain was still there, sharp and overwhelming. But underneath it, something else was growing. Something that felt like determination. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Grandma Ruby. "Come home, baby girl. I've got soup on the stove." Grandma Ruby lived clear across town in the house where Denise had spent summers as a child. It would mean starting over completely, leaving the neighborhood where she had built her life. As she walked away from the house, Denise could still hear Caleb crying upstairs. Each step felt impossible, like she was walking through thick mud. But she kept moving because standing still felt like giving up. She didn't know it yet, but this was not the end of her story. This was just the beginning. Grandma Ruby's house smelled like sage and cornbread, just like it had when Denise was little. The same family photos lined the hallway, and the same hand-stitched quilt was draped over the back of the sofa. But everything felt different now that Denise was here, not as a visitor, but as someone who had lost everything. "Sit yourself down," Grandma Ruby said, not looking up from the stove where she was stirring a pot of chicken and dumplings. At 72, she moved with the same grace she'd had for decades, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her floral house dress perfectly pressed despite the heat from cooking. Denise sank into a kitchen chair, the same one she'd sat in as a child while Grandma Ruby braided her hair for school. The familiarity of it made her chest tight. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Denise admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Grandma Ruby finally turned around, her dark eyes taking in Denise's torn dress and swollen lip. Her expression didn't change, but she reached into the freezer and wrapped some ice in a dish towel. "First thing you're going to do is put this on that lip," she said firmly, pressing the ice into Denise's hands. "Second thing is eat some food. Can't think straight on an empty stomach." "Grandma, I lost my babies," Denise said, the words scraping against her throat like broken glass. "No, you didn't." Grandma Ruby ladled soup into a bowl and set it in front of Denise. "You had to leave them for a minute, but that doesn't mean you lost them. There's a difference. Roland has money for lawyers. I work at a diner." "Your great-great-grandmother was born into slavery," Grandma Ruby said quietly, sitting down across from her. "Your great-grandmother cleaned white folks' houses during the Depression. Your grandmother raised 5 children by herself when your granddaddy died in that factory accident. Every single woman in this family has faced something that felt impossible." Denise looked up at her grandmother, the woman who had helped raise her after her own mother became too sick to care for her properly. Grandma Ruby had never finished high school, but she was the wisest person Denise knew. "What did they do?" Denise asked. "They got to work." Over the next 3 days, Denise barely left Grandma Ruby's house. She called in sick to the diner, knowing she couldn't face customers when she looked like she'd been through a war. Every few hours she would call Roland's number, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried calling the house phone, but Tiffany would answer and hang up as soon as she heard Denise's voice. On Thursday evening, Pastor Banks knocked on Grandma Ruby's door. He was a tall man with kind eyes and hands that had held Denise during her baptism 20 years ago. "Sister Denise," he said gently, settling into the living room with a cup of coffee. "Ruby called me. Said you might need someone to talk to." "I don't know where to start," Denise admitted. "Start wherever feels right." So Denise told him everything. About the years of Roland pulling away from her, about finding strange receipts in his pockets, about the way he'd started talking to her like she was a burden instead of his wife. She told him about Tiffany moving into their house while Denise was at work, about coming home to find her clothes thrown into garbage bags. "And the children?" Pastor Banks asked quietly. "He says I can't see them until we work out custody through the court. But he knows I can't afford a lawyer right now." Pastor Banks was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. "You know, my nephew Jerome just finished law school. He's working at a firm downtown that does pro bono work sometimes." Denise shook her head. "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity if you earn it," Grandma Ruby said from the doorway. She'd been listening the whole time. "Pastor, doesn't your church need someone to help with the books? I seem to remember you mentioning that last Sunday." "Why, yes," Pastor Banks said slowly, understanding passing between him and Grandma Ruby. "We've been looking for someone trustworthy to help organize our finances and plan our community outreach programs. Someone who understands hard work and has experience managing a household budget." Denise looked between them. "I don't have any formal training in bookkeeping." "But you managed your household finances for 10 years, Grandma Ruby pointed out. "You know how to stretch a dollar and make ends meet. That's exactly what the church needs. The position would pay enough for you to rent a small place and save up for legal fees," Pastor Banks added. "And Jerome could probably work out a payment plan for his services." For the first time since she'd been dragged down those stairs, Denise felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. "When could I start?" she asked. The church bookkeeping job was harder than Denise had expected, but in the best possible way. Every morning she would arrive at First Baptist before dawn, when the building was quiet and peaceful. She would make coffee in the church kitchen and settle into the small office behind the sanctuary with ledgers, receipts, and donation records that needed organizing. Pastor Banks hadn't been kidding when he said the books were a mess. The previous bookkeeper had been the pastor's elderly mother, who had done her best but mixed personal notes in with financial records and kept some accounts in her head rather than on paper. Denise found she had a natural talent for organizing information. She created clear systems for tracking donations, expenses, and the various programs the church ran. Within 2 weeks, she had caught several errors that had been costing the church money, and she'd identified 3 community members who had fallen behind on their pledges simply because no one had followed up with them. "Sister Denise," Pastor Banks said one morning reviewing her latest report, "I think we've been underutilizing your skills for years." The work made her feel useful in a way she hadn't experienced since before her marriage started falling apart. At home with Roland, she had felt like she was constantly failing at invisible standards. Here, her accomplishments were clear and measurable. Jerome Williams turned out to be nothing like what Denise had expected. Pastor Banks had described him as, "my nephew who just finished law school," which had made her picture a young man barely out of college. Instead, Jerome was clearly in his early 30s, with an easy smile and the kind of confidence that came from having worked for everything he'd earned. "I went to law school later than most people," he explained when they met at the small coffee shop near the courthouse. "Worked construction for 10 years first, saving up money and figuring out what I really wanted to do with my life." Denise liked that he didn't try to make her feel better with false promises. He was straightforward about what they were up against and realistic about what they could accomplish. "Roland has temporary custody because he's in the family home with what appears to be stable income," Jerome explained, reviewing the papers Roland's lawyer had filed. "But that doesn't mean it's permanent. We need to show the court that you can provide a stable environment for the children." "How do I do that from a one-bedroom apartment behind my grandmother's house?" "One step at a time," Jerome said. "First, we establish that you have steady employment and income. Check. Second, we document every attempt you've made to contact your children and show that Roland is preventing reasonable visitation. Third, we find a larger place for you to live." Denise's heart sank. "I can barely afford where I am now. The church job is just temporary income while you get back on your feet," Jerome said. "What did you want to do before you got married?" The question caught Denise off guard. She hadn't thought about her own dreams in years. "I wanted to open a restaurant," she said slowly. "Nothing fancy, just good food made with love. My mama always said I had a gift for feeding people." Jerome leaned forward, suddenly more interested. "Tell me about that." "I used to cater small events for people at church. Baby showers, anniversary parties, birthday celebrations. Word would get around, and I'd have people calling me every week asking me to cook for their families." Denise paused, remembering. "Roland said it was taking too much time away from home, so I stopped." "Do you still have contacts from those events?" "I suppose so." "Why?" "Because catering is one of the fastest ways to build a food service business without the overhead of a restaurant. And if you're good at it, you can make more money than you think." Over the next month, Denise threw herself into rebuilding her life with the same energy she'd once put into keeping Roland happy. She worked at the church during the day and spent evenings reaching out to old contacts, reminding them that she was available for catering again. The response was overwhelming. Mrs. Henderson, her elderly neighbor from the old neighborhood, hired her to cater her granddaughter's graduation party. That led to 3 more bookings from people who attended the party. Within 6 weeks, Denise was cooking for events every weekend and some weeknights. She moved her catering supplies into Grandma Ruby's kitchen, turning the entire house into a small restaurant on busy weekends. Grandma Ruby didn't complain, instead putting on her apron and helping with prep work like they were business partners. "You're getting your fight back," Grandma Ruby observed one evening as they cleaned up after preparing food for a church anniversary celebration. Denise realized her grandmother was right. The woman who had been dragged down the stairs 2 months ago had felt helpless and broken. This woman felt powerful. But the real test came on a Tuesday evening when she was dropping off a catered dinner for a client and saw Roland's truck in the driveway of her old house. Her hands shook as she parked across the street and watched the front door. After a few minutes, Shayla and Caleb came running out to play in the front yard. They looked smaller than she remembered and thinner. Caleb's shirt was too big for him, and Shayla's hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail that hurt Denise's heart to see. Before she could stop herself, she got out of her car and called their names. Both children froze, then ran toward her faster than she'd ever seen them move. "Mama?" Shayla crashed into her arms so hard it knocked the breath out of her. "Mama, we missed you so much." Caleb wrapped his arms around her legs and started sobbing. "I thought you weren't coming back." Denise dropped to her knees and held them both, breathing in their familiar scent and feeling her heart put itself back together. "I will always come back to you," she whispered. "Always. I'm working so hard to make a home where you can come live with me." "When?" Shayla asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. Before Denise could answer, the front door slammed open and Tiffany stormed out. "Get away from those children," she screamed. "You're not supposed to be here." "Those are my children," Denise said calmly, standing up but keeping her hands on Shayla and Caleb's shoulders. She had practiced this moment in her head dozens of times, knowing it would eventually come. Tiffany stalked closer, her face twisted with anger. "Roland said you can't just show up whenever you want. There are rules now." "The only rule is that I love my children and they love me," Denise replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Daddy said Mama can't take care of us, Caleb said quietly, his small voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Denise's heart clenched, but she kept her expression calm. Daddy was wrong about a lot of things, baby. But I'm going to prove to everyone that I can take care of you better than anyone. Just then Roland appeared in the doorway. He looked tired and older than he had just 3 months ago. His work clothes were wrinkled and he needed a haircut. Denise, he said, his voice warning. You can't be here. I can be on a public street, she said. And I can talk to my children. For a moment, the 4 adults stood in tense silence while Shayla and Caleb looked between their parents with confused, hopeful eyes. Then Mrs. Henderson appeared from her house next door, moving slowly with her walker but clearly determined to insert herself into the situation. Evening, Denise, the elderly woman said pointedly. Heard your catering business is doing real well. My bridge club has been talking about hiring you for our Christmas party. Denise felt a surge of gratitude toward her old neighbor. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I'd love to help with that. Roland's eyebrows rose slightly. Catering business? Mama cooks for lots of people now, Shayla said proudly. Mrs. Johnson at church said Mama made the best mac and cheese she ever tasted. That's nice, Roland said dismissively, but Denise caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes. We should go, Tiffany said, grabbing Roland's arm. The children need to come inside for dinner. As Roland herded the children toward the house, Shayla looked back over her shoulder. Mama, will you come back? Every chance I get, baby, Denise promised. Mrs. Henderson waited until the family was inside before speaking. That girl's got those children eating cereal for dinner half the time, she said quietly. And Roland's been missing work. I see his truck in the driveway when he should be at job sites. This information hit Denise like a lightning bolt. Roland's entire argument for custody was based on his financial stability and her supposed inability to provide for the children. If he was having work problems? Mrs. Henderson, Denise said carefully, if you ever see anything that concerns you about the children's welfare, would you call me? The older woman nodded firmly. Already got your number from Ruby. And honey, I've been keeping notes. Over the next 2 months, Denise's catering business exploded. Word of mouth brought her more clients than she could handle alone, so she hired 2 women from church to help with prep work and serving. She rented a small commercial kitchen space and bought professional equipment. Jerome was amazed when she showed him her financial records at their monthly legal meeting. In 4 months, you've gone from making minimum wage to earning more than many college graduates, he said, looking over her profit and loss statements. This changes everything about our custody case. But more importantly for Denise, the success meant she could afford to rent a real house. Not just any house, but a 3-bedroom place in a good neighborhood with a yard where her children could play safely. The day she got the keys to her new house, she called Grandma Ruby first. I did it, she said, standing in the empty living room that would soon be filled with her children's laughter. No, baby girl, Grandma Ruby said softly. You're doing it. This is just the beginning. Jerome filed their petition for revised custody arrangements on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, Roland's lawyer was calling with a settlement offer. He wants to negotiate, Jerome told Denise over the phone. Are you interested in hearing what he has to say? Denise looked around her new house, at the children's room she had carefully prepared and the kitchen where she planned to cook family dinners every night. She thought about her thriving business and the financial independence she had built from nothing. Yes, she said. I'm interested in hearing his offer. But I'm not interested in settling for less than I deserve. The mediation session was scheduled for the following Wednesday. As Denise prepared for what felt like the most important meeting of her life, she realized something had fundamentally changed about the way she saw herself. 3 months ago, she had been a woman who let others decide her worth. Now she was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth, and she wasn't afraid to demand it. The mediation room felt smaller than Denise had expected, with a long conference table and uncomfortable chairs. Roland sat across from her with his lawyer, a sharp-faced woman who kept checking her phone. He wouldn't make eye contact. Jerome sat beside Denise, calm and professional, with a folder full of documentation that told the story of her transformation. Bank statements showing her growing business income. Rental agreements for her house and commercial kitchen space. Letters of recommendation from clients and church members. Photos of the children's bedrooms in her new home, complete with toys and books and everything 2 growing children could need. My client is willing to agree to shared custody, Roland's lawyer began, with the children spending weekdays with their father and weekends with Mrs. Thompson. Denise had expected this. It was designed to sound reasonable while actually giving her very little time with her children and maintaining Roland's image as the primary parent. That won't work, Jerome said calmly. Mrs. Thompson has established a stable home and income. She's requesting primary physical custody with generous visitation for the father. Roland shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He looked thinner than he had at their last encounter, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Mr. Thompson, the mediator said, I understand you've experienced some changes in your employment situation since the original temporary custody order was put in place. Roland's jaw tightened. Construction work has slow periods. That's normal. According to the documentation we've received, the mediator continued, you've missed 18 days of work in the past 2 months and have been written up twice for tardiness. Denise tried not to feel satisfied by this news, but it was hard. Roland had always prided himself on being a reliable worker. On the other hand, the mediator said, turning to Denise, Mrs. Thompson, your business records show remarkable growth and stability. Can you tell us about your current situation? Denise took a deep breath. I run a catering business that serves clients throughout the city. I have steady contracts with several churches and organizations, plus individual events every week. I've hired employees and rented commercial space. I've also purchased a 3-bedroom house in the Riverside district with a yard and excellent schools. She paused, meeting Roland's eyes for the first time that day. Most importantly, I've done all of this because I want to provide the best possible life for my children. Everything I've built has been for them. What about your work schedule? Roland's lawyer interjected. Catering requires long hours and weekend work. When would you actually be home with the children? Denise had prepared for this question. My busiest times are Friday and Saturday evenings, when many divorced parents have their visitation weekends anyway. Most of my weekday events are smaller and end by early evening. I also have employees now who can handle events when I need to be home with my children. Jerome slid a document across the table. We've prepared a detailed childcare plan that shows how Mrs. Thompson's schedule allows for maximum time with the children while maintaining her business income. The mediation lasted 3 hours. Roland's lawyer tried several different approaches, but each time Jerome calmly presented documentation that showed Denise was not only capable of caring for her children, but was thriving in ways that Roland was not. Finally, Roland himself spoke up. Can I talk to Denise alone for a minute? The lawyers and mediator stepped out, leaving just the two people who had once promised to love each other forever. You look different, Roland said quietly. I am different. He rubbed his face with both hands. Things have been hard since you left. Denise waited, not offering to make this easier for him. Tiffany, she's not good with the kids. She gets frustrated when they ask about you. And they ask about you all the time. Of course they do. I'm their mother. I thought. Roland shook his head. I thought she would step into that role, be a mother to them. But she's not interested in that part. Denise felt a flare of anger. You replaced me with someone who doesn't even want to take care of our children? I didn't replace you, Roland said quickly. I was unhappy and she made me feel, I don't know, young again, I guess. And now, Roland looked down at his hands. Now I work all day trying to keep up with bills for a house that's too big and a woman who spends money like we're rich, and I come home to kids who cry for their mama every night. Denise's anger softened slightly, not for Roland but for her children. They shouldn't have to live like that. I know. Roland's voice was barely above a whisper. I messed up, Denise. I messed up everything. When the lawyers and mediator returned, Roland's demeanor had completely changed. I want what's best for my kids, he told his lawyer. If Denise can provide a better home for them, then that's what should happen. The custody agreement they worked out was better than anything Denise had dared to hope for. Primary physical custody to her, with Roland having the children every other weekend and one evening per week. Child support that would help with their expenses. And most importantly, immediate implementation, meaning the children could move in with her that very week. As they left the courthouse, Jerome walked beside her in comfortable silence until they reached their cars. How does it feel? He asked. Denise looked up at the afternoon sky, feeling lighter than she had in years. Like I can breathe again. 3 days later, she stood in the driveway of Roland's house, her former house, waiting for her children to come home with her. Really home this time. Shayla and Caleb burst through the front door with suitcases and backpacks, their faces shining with excitement. Is this really happening, Mama? Shayla asked, throwing her arms around Denise's waist. Really and truly, Denise confirmed, kissing the top of her daughter's head. As they loaded the car with the children's belongings, Denise caught sight of Tiffany watching from the front window. The woman who had once dragged her down these stairs now looked small and uncertain. Roland came out to help with the last of the bags. He moved slowly like he was in pain. "Take care of them," he said quietly. "I always have," Denise replied. "And I always will." As she drove away from that house for what she knew would be the last time, Denise glanced in the rearview mirror at her children. They were holding hands in the back seat, both of them smiling. "Mama," Caleb said, "our new house smells like cookies." Denise laughed, the sound surprising her with its joy. "That's because I baked cookies for when you came home." "Are we really going to live together now?" Shayla asked. "Every single day, baby girl. Every single day." 6 months later, Denise stood in the living room of that same house, but now it looked completely different. Family photos covered the mantel. The children's artwork was displayed proudly on the refrigerator. The sound of laughter filled rooms that had once echoed with arguing and tears. Her catering business had grown so much that she was considering opening the restaurant she had always dreamed of. Jerome had become more than just her lawyer. He was a friend who shared Sunday dinners with her family and helped Caleb with his math homework. But the most satisfying moment came when she drove past her old neighborhood and saw a "For Rent" sign in the yard of Roland's house. Mrs. Henderson called her that evening with the news. "Roland lost the house," the elderly woman reported. "Bank foreclosed last month. Word is he and that girlfriend of his broke up too. He's moved into one of those extended stay motels out by the highway." Denise felt a complex mix of emotions, not happiness at Roland's misfortune, but a sense of justice that felt deeply satisfying. "Mrs. Henderson," she said carefully, "do you know who the new landlord is?" 2 weeks later, Denise stood in the driveway of her former home with a real estate agent, looking at the house where she had once lost everything. "The bank is motivated to sell quickly," the agent was saying. "The previous owners left it in good condition, and the price reflects the urgency of the sale." Denise walked through rooms that held so many memories. The kitchen where she had cooked thousands of meals. The living room where her children had taken their first steps. The stairs where she had been dragged down by her hair. But those painful memories felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. This was just a house, and she was a woman with the power to decide what happened next. "I'll take it," she said. The paperwork took a month to complete. When she got the keys, Denise brought Shayla and Caleb with her to see the house that had once been their home. "Are we moving back?" Caleb asked, confused. "No, baby. We're happy where we live now. But this house is going to help other families who need a place to live." Denise had decided to turn the property into a rental home for single mothers who were getting back on their feet. She would charge affordable rent and work with women who needed a safe place to rebuild their lives, just like she had. The first tenant was a young woman named Angela who was leaving an abusive relationship with her 2 small children. When Denise handed her the keys, Angela started crying. "I can't believe someone would trust me with something this nice," Angela whispered. "I can," Denise said firmly. "Sometimes we all need someone to believe in us while we learn to believe in ourselves again." A year after moving into the house, Roland called Denise. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Denise," he said, his voice different than she remembered. Smaller somehow. "I heard about what you did. With the house." "What about it?" I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. And I'm proud of you. For what you've built." Denise looked around her kitchen, where Shayla was helping her bake cookies for a church potluck while Caleb did homework at the counter. Jerome was coming for dinner later, bringing flowers from his garden and a smile that made her feel beautiful. "Thank you," she said simply and meant it. After she hung up, Shayla looked at her curiously. "Was that Daddy?" "Yes, baby." "Is he okay?" Denise considered the question seriously. "He's learning to be okay. Just like we did." That evening, as she tucked her children into their beds in the home she had built with her own 2 hands, Denise reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had been broken down, literally dragged to the bottom by people who were supposed to love her. But she had gotten back up, step by step, and built something better than anything she had lost. The woman who had been pulled down those stairs by her hair was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to demand it. Someone who had learned that the best revenge wasn't anger or bitterness. The best revenge was building a beautiful life.